Education, Our Common Struggle is brought to you by Stallworth and Lindenbeck, Michigan Bell, and the Michigan Insurance Federation.
Good evening, and welcome to the Stallworth and Lindenbeck Tradition of Service presentation, Education, Our Common Struggle. Tonight, our Corporate Risk Control Unit, Stallworth and Lindenbeck, and our national partner, Republic Hog Robinson, have picked up the challenge and momentum begun by the City of Youth campaign. Just as we are concerned about the financial success of our clients, so too are we concerned about promoting academic excellence for all of our children. Tonight's broadcast demonstrates that commitment.
At Republic Hog Robinson, we are committed to develop a winning attitude among our associates. As one of the largest insurance brokers in the world, our success depends heavily upon our ability to continue to invest in our single most important asset, our people. As a nation, our educational system has evolved from one of simply better training to one of understanding. The aim of education is to impel our young people into value-forming experiences. We as individuals and as a nation are better than we know. And if through education we can be made to see that, then perhaps in our lifetime we'll be unwilling to settle for anything less. Our company's foundation is built on quality people seeking excellence every day. Please join our firm, as others have, in fighting this thing called mediocrity. We as a nation are better than that, and so are America's children.
The holiday season is a time for reflection on our many blessings. This special presentation is our way of saying thank you to all of those who have helped to make our family and our businesses successful.
Tonight you'll have an opportunity to meet Michigan's Governor John Engler, as well as a number of business and civic leaders committed to educating our children. We think you'll find the discussion with the governor insightful and informative. We also think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the vast array of personalities we've assembled to bring you this special presentation.
Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to join us for the Stallworth Super Anchor Party for the United Negro College Fund.
That's right. If you haven't already made plans, join us right here for the Lou Rawls Parade of Stars, the Stallworth Super Anchor Party for UNCF. Okay. Before we get into our program and take you to the governor, I'd like to share a few things with you. As commercial insurance brokers, of course, mathematics plays an integral part of our everyday life. Whether you're a parent or a student, it also plays an integral part of your life as well. Before we take you to the governor, we'd like to share with you what a few of our friends have to say about perhaps the most misunderstood yet important subject in our educational foundation, mathematics.
We hope you enjoy the program, and happy holidays.
More than half of you failed. This is the poorest class I've had in a long, long time. Don't you realize that mathematics is an important subject? I tell you right now that unless you get over your lazy habits and come up to the standards I have set for this class, many of you will have the pleasure of repeating this course next semester.
I was in college before I realized that mathematics is not cold. Mathematics is not like a piece of colorless, cold marble. It has feeling. It has a warm temperature. Mathematics has a beauty. Mathematics has a pulse. It has a heartbeat.
Become extremely important because for every unit that you see in this department, I had to calculate how much it would cost me to bring it in. Could I afford to bring it in? How much inventory do I need to keep in the store at a certain time? I buy for 44 stores. Some of my lines are in 44 stores. That's 44 times the number of the amount of merchandise that you see here. It's always important to study mathematics. I mean, when I was in high school, I was always afraid of mathematics. I thought, oh my God, you know, I can't master that. It took a little more application for me, but now when I look back, it was the greatest thing that I could have done, because once I learned that I could do it, it took out the fear. And once you get over the fear of learning math, it really does become a lot simpler.
Good evening. This is Sharon Stallworth, and joining us this evening is Governor John Engler. Governor, welcome.
Sharon, it's a delight to be on this forum and to have an opportunity to talk about the most important issue facing America and the state of Michigan, education.
Well, Governor, this evening we want to talk about strategies, we want to talk about policy. We'd like to get into discussion with you and later with our panelists about what is the status of education in the state of Michigan now, and also what are the strategies in place and the plan to move education forward. Before we get into strategies, let's begin with your assessment of public education in the state of Michigan right now.
Public education in the state of Michigan isn't good enough today. It's an $8 billion industry that needs to be improved. Our graduates aren't as talented as they need to be. They don't know enough. Too many people are dropping out and not graduating. We have to fix that. And so all in all, we've got a lot of work to do. That's not to say that there aren't some bright spots, some success stories in Michigan, but I think we rank about average in our state, and that isn't good enough. When we look at the American student compared to the foreign students that we're going to have to compete with in our global economy, we simply have to do a lot better. And the challenges are urgent. We need to start now. We need to do, as Lamar Alexander, the Secretary of Education, said, let's break the mold, and we've got to do that with some of our outmoded thinking. It has to be really changed. I'm looking forward to our panel. It's a provocative group that we've got with us today.
Yes. Where do we begin?
I think we begin with the schools themselves. If we look at education in Michigan, over 500 plus school districts, but more importantly, over 3,200 schools, school buildings where learning takes place. And they are today a franchise almost, if you will, exclusive territories for these schools. I've suggested that we need to break out of this and to give parents and students more choices, more options. We saw an effort by the Detroit Board of Education and the leadership to do that with the all-male academies. I support that type of approach. I support allowing local people to create options to do it differently. We've seen springing up across this state in Kalamazoo area, a science and math center where all of the students in the intermediate district compete for the right to attend this school that focuses on the science and math development. I think that we've got to give administrations a great deal more flexibility, break down some of the rules and some of the barriers that have prevented things from being done. I think that the schools themselves have to be freed so that they can reward competence and excellence and replace incompetence and lack of achievement.
Governor, when you mentioned school of choice and giving parents and the community more power to choose the education, one problem with that I've read about and I understand is that when you're dealing with a community that has very few resources, you then have very few choices, so that your choice may still be limited. How do you address that when you're talking about a community with limited economic resources, with limited human resources? How then do you create something from little?
Well, I think that we start with parents, or in many cases, far too many cases, a single parent today, and they want what's best for their child, and they have a pretty good sense about is this school going to work or isn't it? What's going to be a better break for my child? And I think we have to help them, even give them more information about their schools. Michigan's a leader with our Public Act 25, the school improvement planning process. Every school in the state, every one of those 3,200 schools today has to have a plan, has to involve parents, the teachers, the staff at the schools, talk about their test scores and how to do it better. I think we have to change our testing too. I think we have to measure outcomes. I'm less interested in telling someone how to get there, because I've had a lot of teachers say to me, you know, we can teach if we're freed up to do it. Give us the resources, give us the help, and let us do what we know how to do. And to that parent who doesn't have a lot of resources, even we saw it in Detroit, many parents who said, look, I may not have a lot of choices, but here's an all-male academy with discipline, with rigor in the curriculum, and we want our child to have that opportunity to go there.
But even with that, it's limited. I mean, just you only can serve so many children, and there was an application process, and If you could just maybe walk us through, I think it would be helpful. I think when we look at a lot of strategies and
Sure.
the ideas, and we talk about terms like empowerment and community-directed, you get a sense that that sounds good and that sounds powerful for a community. But if we could just walk us through, take a given school in a given community where you have 80% of the population may be headed by one person, maybe where the income level is below middle income, where resources are few, where staff morale is low. How could that, given that school, let's say maybe the school population, the elementary school, let's say of maybe 350 or 450 students, where would they begin, step by step, to begin to really put in place, for instance, school improvement?
Well, I think it's an excellent question, and I think it starts right at that school. I think there's got to be a talented principal in that school. There has to be a leader. And I think that the administration has to be in a position to be able to put good principals in schools. I don't think that we can have a set of laws which allow someone to, merely because of the collective bargaining agreement, to stay in place as a principal at the school that we're talking about, even if they've shown they can't do the job. So you've got to have the ability to put leadership in there. You've got to have the ability to assemble a staff that isn't tired, that isn't low on its morale, and you've got to have that staff then working to develop the kind of curriculum. And I think that when we talk about empowerment, what's it mean? It really means the right to be able to make some of these decisions. And we've got a school building that may not open until that parent's gone off to work. We're going to let that child go home at 3 o'clock before the parent gets home. Maybe we're going to talk about expanding the length of the school day. We may talk about expanding the length of the school year. All of these things have to be factored in, and let's start creating some choices so the parent can say, well, I like that about this school. I want my child to go there. Someone else can say, no, I don't. I want a traditional program. I want 8 in the morning and home at 3. And
what are the constraints? What gets in the way of that happening, and what would get in the way?
I think old-fashioned thinking, outmoded thinking, lack of courage to make changes, defense of the status quo, some of the same things that hurt us in other areas of society. We've done it this way for 100 years. Why change? Well, we change because we aren't doing it well enough today. And when we talk about the cycle of poverty, how do we break that? Clearly the schools have an important role to play. We've got to start earlier. One of the things that we've put in our education plan is working with every child much earlier, trying to work with those at-risk families so we can start with that child at the earliest possible age and integrate more carefully and fully our social services and human services into the school itself.
Could you talk a little bit more about that, about the early education? Because I understand Head Start has been in jeopardy, and funds for early education in preschool actually has been dwindling. So what's the early education
That
plan?
may be true nationally, but not in Michigan. Actually, we've got some additional $25 million in those programs this year. That's been one of the priority areas, and it's something we feel very strongly about. And I personally believe that that's one of the great things you can do. The President's outlined 6 national education goals. One of those is to have every child ready to learn when they start school. And that's an ambitious goal. The others are quickly a disciplined learning environment that's drug-free and violence-free. Another is measurable outcomes at the 4th, 8th, and the 12th grade. Another is that we be first in math and science in the world by the end of the 1990s. And finally, that we have an adult literacy program that we can go after our adult population. Well, all of that can be integrated in the schools. When I talk about bringing some of the human services programs to the schools, we're again recognizing that while we have an $8 billion education industry in Michigan, we spend $5.8 billion just in the Department of Social Services alone. That's an all-time record. And so what we want to do is maybe some of those services can be more effectively delivered where the young people spend most of their time, and that's school. And so we're looking at some innovative break-the-mold kinds of programs that way. And summer school is another thing that it gets to be very important. Should we not have something going on, and maybe even change the structure of the school year so we don't have that 3-month gap where what they learned in June maybe has been forgotten by September. And so all of this is possible. And we look at schools today, and with, as I said, an $8 billion investment, it's hard to argue that we're not spending enough, but are we getting enough? I don't think so.
Have there been school districts that have adopted some of the policies and some of the strategies that you've outlined, the early education, bringing more social services to the schools, involving staff in overhauling curriculum if you need to? Have there been some school districts where there have been some successes in the last?
I think there have been some successes. I'm not sure that I can point to any right here in our own backyard. There's a class here or a program there. I'll tell you that the environment in the school makes a big difference. We've seen in some of the private schools where that has made an enormous difference, just in terms of the attitude of the child toward the school and the feeling of security and safety and confidence that one has at school. So we can go around the country and find different examples. The fact is, though, that education is such a big business in our schools, and the City of Detroit Public Schools, I think the budget's over $1 billion. Well, that's a big industry. We can't run that from Lansing, but we need to give the board and the superintendent the kinds of autonomy and authority they need to be able to make some decisions. And we need to free them from our...
How do you do that? What are the state policies or the state initiatives that would then allow local districts that kind of autonomy?
I think we've taken probably too much power out of the hands of the administration and the school board and let it be lost through collective bargaining. I think that's one factor. Particularly at the principal level. I think our Department of Education imposes too many rules and regulations on school districts, too much counting for this dollar and that dollar rather than simply focusing on the outcomes. The important question is, what's the child know at the end of the day, at the end of the year? And that ought to be our objective. I mean, the school year that we have today was set up for an agrarian society 100 years ago, and nobody goes home in May or June to do crops anymore.
But at the state level, then, how does the state assist the local district to make those kind of changes?
We go to the legislature and say, this is our agenda. This is what the people of Michigan want. This is what the people, in fact, need. Vote the changes. It's voting on specific bills in the legislature that...
And you've mentioned collective bargaining several times, and so you see that there needs to be some kind of legislation then that changes the collective bargaining.
Well, I think, let's just take tenure, for example, which is a statutory right. We have one case where it took 15 years to remove a teacher to settle a case who was determined was not doing the job ultimately. Is
that typical?
No, that's the most extreme example. But imagine that kind of an example, 15 years that before all the litigation was wrapped up. What about, is a principal a part of the management, or is that part of the union? You know, I think that that's a pretty important position to be determined by seniority. If I got the right seniority, I get the school. I don't like that, and I think that we ought to. Again, we've got to start our inquiry from what's in the best interest of the child. And too frequently we've said.
Excuse me, Governor, but it almost sounds like sometimes that you're almost advocating doing away with the union altogether in terms of the teacher union, because maybe it's just changing the collective bargaining process. But when I keep hearing collective bargaining is one of the major issues, one of the major constraints. I
don't want us to get distracted over there, because that's one of those politically sensitive things, because they frankly, the teachers unions have been very dominant in policy making, and they're an important part of the change. We simply can't replace, nor should we seek to, all of our teachers. We've got outstanding teachers out there. What I say in terms of empowering a school, one of the things that's very important in a school building is if the third grade teacher isn't good, that impacts the ability of the fourth grade teacher to do her job.
What incentives would you suggest then to build in so teachers would buy into this kind of a empowerment or kind of plan where the overhaul, where the teachers see that there's some benefit for the students, but that also that they're protected and they have some security also?
Well, I think that the focus on believing in the child is the priority of what we're doing. I mean, if that's not the priority, then we perhaps have a problem right out of the box. I mean, and that's...
But people are always concerned about job security, and they're always concerned about evaluation process and whether or not it's going to be a fair one, and whether or not they're going to be awarded, or whether or not they're going to be compensated for their job.
Sounds to me like that's the problem, doesn't it?
It's an issue. I'm sure it's an issue, and it's one that one of the issues that will continue to have to be discussed and
Well, I'd like to
worked
just start
through.
from the interest of the child and then work toward a system that works. What's in the best interest of the child? How do we get the best possible teacher in front of that classroom? How do we give that teacher the help that he or she needs to do the job? How do we put the right kind of role models there? How do we help that family? It's all of that. Let's start from that basis. I think for too long we've started from what's the interest group want?
I think you're right, that we will have to start with what's best for the child, and when we come back, we're going to come back with a panelist, and we can start there. What is best for the child, and how do we get there, and how do we make sure that we look at the other interests also, because in order to meet the needs of the child, there are all the adults that are involved in the caregivers, as I call them, for the children, and the educators. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Looking forward to the panel.
Education, Our Common Struggle, is brought to you by Stallworth and Lindenbeck.
Changing your communication systems? Michigan Bell can get you out of the phone business and back into your business like nobody's business. Ameritech Centrex service from Michigan Bell. Running a small business has you wearing enough hats. Changing your phone system doesn't have to add one more. Call 1-800-67-SOLVE-IT for Ameritech Centrex service from Michigan Bell.
Would you believe that Michigan has the best auto insurance system in the world? Consumer Reports says so. Changing Times Magazine says so. They say this because our no-fault system means that you get paid completely and fully when you have an automobile accident. People buying automobile insurance in Michigan pay less than the national average, but it still can be expensive. A little later in this program, we're going to tell you what we're doing to try and reduce your premiums in Lansing.
My name is Brian Ruggles. I'm the sound engineer for Billy Joel. It's not really complicated. It's like a big stereo system at home. It's just a little more sophisticated and high performance. Mixing sound is taking all these inputs, all the different instruments and vocals and things, and you actually mix it, you blend it so it sounds right.
What I do is I'm an acoustical consultant, and so I design concert halls, theaters, sound systems. What I do here at the Hollywood Bowl is I'm part of a team that has designed a sound system to solve some of the problems that an 18,000-seat arena presents you with. And what we tried to do is design something that would give uniform coverage so everybody in the audience could hear. What the mathematics allows you to do is it gives you tools for describing what you hear.
It's called the acoustic wave music system, and it's called that because it uses waves to amplify the sound. This entire tube is in here, in this volume. I have a hard time believing that every time I say it. It's in there in a folded fashion. This comes apart in many, many sections. Each section, for example, has a cross-section that looks like that. Waves travel up and down through here, up here, over here, down here, around, and all 80 inches of that with the same cross-section is contained between the loudspeaker, which is buried in here, and the exits, which are down here. And how you get from that to here is another direct application of mathematics. Math is like a puzzle. You have something exciting you want to do. You use the rules of mathematics to find the answer. And the answer, in school, the answer is an answer that everybody got before because you're learning. You only solve problems that were solved before. In careers in science and engineering, that answer is a discovery because nobody found the answer before.
I think the imperative for our school system is that we all share in the responsibility for educating our children, and a very important part of that shared responsibility is the family, and particularly parents. You know, when we put together the rewards and jobs and scholarships, a certainty of opportunity for young people like the Detroit Compact, when we put that together with people who care, particularly the family and parents of young people, we really have an unbeatable combination. And we've demonstrated through the Compact that parents do care about their children. In fact, we have so much parental involvement. We see parents, we have meetings where hundreds of parents will show up where before just a few maybe showed up. So we know that parents do care. What we need to constantly do is make sure that they have the resources and that families are strong so that in fact the family can provide that environment for young people to learn and to grow and be nurtured and raised the way we all want to see children raised. So we do have a shared responsibility. I think that's an imperative for us, and we must always realize that much of that responsibility does rest with the family, with parents. We need to do everything we can to ensure that families are strong so in fact they can play their part in educating young people.
The development of adequate financial resources to deliver the quality public education product that we all think this community deserves. The Board of Education has prepared a comprehensive education plan that parents have accepted, the public has accepted, the board is committed to. The leadership in the form of Dr. McGriff has been brought on board to implement that plan. Now the next essential step is to see that the public education system is properly financed.
Joining me now on our Focus on Education is my co-host, Mike Payne. Mike, you've been out, you've had discussions with people in the street, you've been talking with parents and students. What have you found, what have you seen in terms of education and their perspectives?
Well, here in the city of Detroit and some of the outlying suburban cities, I've found that a lot of parents really are worried as to how they will be able to better educate their children. Most know about the all-male academy, but there's questions now of, well, if I don't send my child there, if I don't send my son there, where can I send my child? What public high school can I send them to? There's questions about violence. How do we reduce that? There's questions of the compact issue. There's also questions of whether or not schools will actually get the funding that they need as far as computers and other types of equipment. Matter of fact, I have a bit of a tape.
Good.
And I'd like to share that tape with you and some of the comments that we received, some of the questions for the governor, as a matter of fact. If you had a chance to ask the governor a question on education, what would it be? And here's that tape now.
Governor England, I would like to know, what could you do about job co-op for the young peoples? Give them something to do to keep them out of the streets and off the drugs.
I would like to ask Governor Engler, what would he do about the violence in schools. You know, the guys coming in school with guns and all that. I wonder what, we should have something done about that, you know, like a detector or something, because I heard about too many people. I see too many people getting hurt up in school, and I think he should do something about that.
The lottery is supposed to subsidize the educational system within the city of Detroit and the surrounding communities in Michigan. Why is it not doing that?
I'd like to ask Governor Engler if he were in Detroit and 1/3 of our graduating seniors can neither read or write. Is that the school teacher's fault, or is it the parents, or a combination of both?
Now that those questions have been asked, and we have the man himself, the chief executive of the state of Michigan, Governor Engler. Governor Engler, we would like to ask you, what about the violence? What can be done in order to minimize the violence in our public schools now?
Well, Mike, I think it's like Devil's Night in Detroit. People have got to get mad and say, that's it, no more. The support is there to keep violence out of the schools, but we've got to act upon that. That means that the principals have to have the power. They have to be backed up by state law if necessary. This is a priority. I'm sure that the superintendent probably can address that, because I think that there are programs going on across the state in schools. Everybody handles it differently because the problems are different. But the first is the commitment, and I was impressed with the young woman's question, because she made it very clear in her question that she was tired of it, and that's one of our national education goals. It's very important. You've got to have an environment where you can feel secure, and I think whatever it takes is what ought to be done. And despite the ACLU's position on metal detectors, if that's what it takes, it's sad that it would come to that, but absolutely, whatever it takes.
One thing, when I was out on the street getting comments, talking to different people about the problems of education, one thing that they found is just the fact that we've gotten away from basics. I think when it comes down to the state of Michigan, you have everyone's full support when it comes down to returning power to the schools, to the teacher. A lot of times, and I've heard this from many adults, when they were in school, you weren't just promoted because you had gotten older or because they were tired of looking at you, as a couple of people have put it. But you stayed there until you got that knowledge, and then you were moved on. Have we gotten away from basics, sir?
Well, I think a little bit. I think we have had social promotions in education, and I think we've gotten away from outcomes driving those decisions. We have to have that, because we're kidding ourselves if we think we can just promote somebody along, tell them they've learned something when in fact they haven't, because the world out there is unforgiving on this. International competition's unforgiving on this fact. And it's perhaps one of the reasons today that the top 5% American students, their performance on international tests in science and math are equaled by the top 50% of, say, the Japanese student or the Korean student. And that simply is unacceptable. And I don't think we can count on somebody else doing less well in the future. We just have to do it a lot better. And that, to me, is a top priority. Another thing that we can do on the violence is we can bring more people into the schools, too. I think the role of the volunteer is important. We've got seniors that have come in some schools and helped to play a role. They're simply there, helping out. All of this kind of cooperative, community-based strategy. The churches have a role to play, because violence serves no one and it hurts everyone.
You know, we've talked a little bit about corporal punishment now as a means for discipline and whether or not we should return to that, and about violence in response to the student's question to the governor. I'd like to turn it to Dr. McGriff and ask her if she might respond. First of all, you know, we hear a lot about violence, and the student asked about that also. But give us a clearer picture. Is the violence all that we might think it is and all that we see in the media? Is every school, in fact, one that we need to be alarmed about and frightened when we send our children to school?
Absolutely not. Every single school is not a school that's unsafe and where parents have to worry about the safety of their son or daughter when they enter a school building. My position is always this notion of a safe environment starts with the community. And that's not to say that it is not my responsibility to maintain safe schools, but I should not have young children who are afraid to walk to school because of the violence that they experience from their house to the school building. And until the larger community attacks violence in the larger society, you will continue to see violence in schools. I'm probably one of the only superintendents who will not say that every problem comes to the school door and the larger community has no responsibility. We are, as a society, violent. And young people see more violence on television and in the larger society than they should have to experience. But we have some very specific things that we can do to make sure that schools are safe too. Corporal punishment is not one of them. We need to be teaching young people to be problem solvers, to control their own emotions in a positive way. Otherwise, you're developing adults that without a threat have no way of being contributing members to society. Many schools could have safer environments simply by monitoring who enters their building and where they're going. Yet many parents will feel that the school is a prison if they're asked to sign in when they enter a school building. But it makes for a much safer school environment. We are working with our security guards. We're also working with students. Students can play a role. Many school districts have a number of peer mediation programs, conflict resolution programs, violence reduction programs. These are skills that young people need not only when they're in school, but they need them when they work, they need them when they're in their communities. So I think all of those things need to take place and can contribute to a safer school environment. And if you don't have an orderly school environment, there is no learning that will take place. I mean, it's sort of like the foundation, number one thing you have to do. And I tend to tell parents, you don't want to go back to the basics, because the basics for the 21st century are not the same basics that we had in school. Yes, young people need to learn to write and to read and compute, but they need to learn to do that at a much higher level. Young people also need to learn to work in teams, which was not a basics. You never hear anybody from the past talk about the ability to work in a team. You don't hear them talking about the ability to think and problem solve either. You don't hear them talking about the ability to interact with people whose culture is different from your own. All of these are skills that young people need in the 21st century. So when I talk to parents, I talk to them about making sure your youngsters have the skills that they need to be successful tomorrow. Every young person needs an education beyond high school to be successful tomorrow. And if we tell parents all you need to do is go back to the 40s and 50s, the good old days, we remember them better than they actually were. I'm sorry.
That's true.
You know, it sounds a little different, Dr. McGriff, than I guess one of the first national reports was A Nation at Risk, and it seemed to really promote and I guess encourage back to the basics, and that, as a matter of fact, is what we had come away from, and that's why we were not able to compete in a world economy and compete with other Western nations, developed nations. But you saying that's not the answer.
Computers were not a part of the basics in the 40s. I mean, I think as a society, if we really think about what children need for tomorrow, we can identify a number of skills that young people must develop if we're going to compete internationally.
Let me ask you a
beyond
question.
The basics.
Question. And a number of the things that you mentioned, cooperative learning, for instance, children working in groups, the idea of conflict resolution, learning how to work through disagreement without violence. Sometimes I've heard from educators, and I know from others, that those programs, those classes, those strategies within the school are kind of soft, and that why spend time with these soft classes, so to speak, or the time on the soft stuff? Is that really as essential as math? Are we really going to be able to compete in the sciences?
I don't consider anything that we do for young people soft. Educators say that they educate the whole child. But then when you talk about anything other than intellectual development, it becomes soft. If young people are not emotionally stable, if they don't have good social skills, if they're not physically healthy, intellectual development means nothing. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. And as educators, we have a responsibility to balance the time that we devote to the various aspects of a youngster's development.
Let's open this up a little bit. Dr. Adamany, president of Wayne State University. Students entering the university, are they ready?
In many cases, Sharon, they are not ready. And where they are not ready is in basic skills. English writing and reading comprehension are frequently weak, and most of our entering students do not have sufficient high school mathematics. Partly this is because we are not counseling and directing students fully enough to take essential courses during their middle school and high school years. And so we need to do much better in giving students guidance as to what is needed. In addition, I think we need to do a better job of communicating for the students who do enroll in those programs, we need to do a better job of communicating the essentials to them. We are doing too much remedial work. We are imposing proficiency examinations for students to make sure that they have the basic English and math skills in order to go through college. We are not seeing students as well prepared as we would like.
Okay, and with that in mind, I had a chance to talk to some educators here in the city of Detroit, and this is what they had to say.
One problem would be funding. It would be very helpful if we could reduce class size. If you look around in this classroom, you will see 35 students here. We don't have an extra seat in the class except that one student is absent today. So it would be very helpful if we could have class size reduced probably to somewhere 20 to 25 students.
Okay, any other problems?
Also, we're not able to give our children all of the support they need as far as remedial reading programs, remedial math. Many of them are in need of psychological assistance and need social work help, but we're not able to do that because of funding from the government, and we do need more funding for those programs. Also, it would be helpful if we could have more funding to assist our teachers with keeping abreast of what's latest in educational programs and so forth, and in our training.
I'm one of the teachers who got a computer for my classroom, the Classrooms of Tomorrow proposal, and it is nice to have one in the classroom. It is not the same as a class full of them. To be able to have an English or any other class where students can all work on a computer at the same time is wonderful. For example, if in writing, students who wouldn't write an essay if you begged them or threatened them will sit at a computer and write because it's more fun.
Okay, Mr. Barton. From the standpoint of a businessman, through your many companies, sir, you've hired a lot of area Detroiters, Metro Detroiters. Can you tell us basically what they're lacking with many of the applicants that come to you looking for a job, what they're lacking these days?
Well, it's a tough question. The ones we've hired weren't lacking very much at all. They're good people. Those we didn't hire were lacking just basic skills. The ability to just fill out an employment application was a problem. The ability to communicate in writing and with their co-worker was a problem. And as the governor said, we may have to make sure that we prepare our workforce to compete not just locally, but regionally and internationally. Because that's the competition, and we have to prepare ourselves for it right now if we're going to keep our people employed, our workforce.
But you know, one thing that I've found is, as time has gone on over the last couple of years, more and more businessmen, more and more CEOs have complained about the level of education as far as job applicants, as far as what they know or what they don't know. From your standpoint, what's really missing? What do we really need to get back on top in order to at least to begin to be competitive in the business world with other nations?
I think work ethic is a big part of it. People are just not inclined to want to work anymore. I guess we're spoiled in a sense. And I think we have to go back to the old days and want to earn and work our way up instead of being carried along by someone else. The business person just wants a good employee who's going to work, who's going to come to work and perform his job or responsibility, to be a part of the team in order to produce goods and services so that that business can make a profit and therefore reinvest into the community.
So in other words, in a sense, you're sort of agreeing with Dr. McGriff, and that is that soft stuff, as it was put. We need that desperately.
I totally agree with Dr. McGriff. It's a total package. You have to have the soft as well as all of the intellectual training that's necessary to compete in today's world. It's reality today.
Okay, Mr. Smith, how do you feel about that question as far as what we're lacking these days?
It would be very difficult for me to add much more than what you already heard. It isn't just the qualities that a job applicant brings that you can document through testing upon exit from the formal education process. It's also, to a large extent, an attitude. Excuse me. It's being dependable. It's being able to interact with other people in a work environment so as to produce a result. There are many soft things as well as the hard things. I think we all do represent, among others, the various stakeholders that are involved in the Detroit Compact and that are making it successful. You asked earlier about some examples of where an approach to improving the education product is underway and could be observed. Certainly the Detroit Compact is one of those stories. I wouldn't want to suggest that after 3 years we have a shining example of success, but we certainly have some very strong indications that the...
Tell us a story. Tell us a story.
The Compact, oversimplifying, is a process that's being delivered through the Detroit public school system that assures a job or an opportunity to complete a college education upon successfully graduating, meeting college-ready or job-ready standards. And it involves everyone, from the student to the parent to the teacher, the school administrator, the principal, the unions, the state education department, the governor's office, all the in essence, all the stakeholders who are concerned about the quality of public education and who are willing to contribute to a process that hopefully represents a creative way to address that problem.
So what are the requirements for a school to get involved with Compact? Could all Detroit schools, for instance, be Compact schools?
Ultimately, that would be a very desirable accomplishment. It's a management problem. How many schools can be incorporated in the Compact process? At the moment, there are 21. They apply and prepare to be accepted into the Compact, and then once involved in the Compact, all the resources that I've mentioned come together and work with that school to try to provide the students with the certainty of opportunity that the Compact holds for them.
Ms. Williams, Geneva Williams, who is president of United Community Services, could you talk just a little bit about if you've had some association with Compact from a community standpoint? As I understand, it is a collaboration of community and school and business about Compact, and then also just from a community perspective, what you see as the imperative and where we need to begin in turning around the problems in education.
Well, I think what's exciting about the Compact and other similar ventures like that is what makes it happen is that it's the young person, the reward, and then people who care. It's guaranteeing the certainty of opportunity for young people. That is, if in fact you can make a difference in what you achieve, if you can meet certain job and college-ready standards, then you will be guaranteed a job or a college tuition. And then on the other side of that, working with the young person is people who care. And I really think that's what's going to make the difference in our educational responsibility, our educational progress, when in fact we do share responsibility. We all have a responsibility to help educate our children. There's an African proverb that talks about it takes a village to raise a child. Clearly, all of us working together, community, business, education, can in fact educate children. And it's working in the Compact. In fact, we can see in schools where kids weren't coming to class, that now they are coming. We are looking, in fact, when we see schools that have parents involved, that test scores go up. So when we see increasing levels of parents and community involvement, we see changes in young people's academic achievement. And it's all about working together. And I think there are many, many fine examples of that happening. As you know, Compact is in 21 schools now, representing about 20% of the population school school population. But the important point is that when every young person signs a compact agreement, he or she must sign with the parent. So right now, we've got over 14,000 plus parents involved in the education of children.
Ms. Williams, it sounds like that's a beginning, and I think we've just have begun to really identify what some of the opportunities are and what some of the strategies are. We will be back.
Education, Our Common Struggle is brought to you by Stallworth and Lindenbeck.
Hello?
Daddy, quick, turn to channel 8.
1 to 1, we're all connected.
Isn't that the guy you told me about?
Maybe he could really play sax.
I think I'll watch it too.
I'll call you back.
Heart to heart, right down the line.
Sharing something special is easy. Just call.
Hello?
Glad you called. Thanks for looking out for the old man.
Just call, we're all connected.
Did you know that 92 cents out of every dollar you pay for automobile insurance in Michigan goes to pay for medical care, to fix cars, and for lawyers' fees? The cost of medical care, auto repairs, and lawyers have gone through the roof. The Michigan Insurance Federation wants to keep these costs low. We're working in Lansing to do just that. When these costs are lowered, your premiums can be lowered, and we believe that's good for everyone.
Roger, copy. Okay. Okay, fish, we're at attitude, and you go ahead and start taking your bar off. Oops, and here we go. Bar's off. On 3. Okay, we're coming up. They're real slow. Yeah, I just want to tell you, if something ever happens, then I'm about to lose it. I'm going to give it a heck of a push.
During the construction of the space station, the astronaut could be easily disconnected from the space station and fall overboard. When that happened, the robot would be sent out to rescue the astronaut.
We would have a robot that would go out and retrieve him and act as like a lifeguard in space.
Retriever, search astronaut.
Tracking target and ready to rendezvous. Rendezvous.
Using the kind of mathematics I learned in school, programming the computer, and lo and behold, you see the hands start moving just like you wanted to.
And I used geometry, basic geometry or basic trigonometry, to program the arm to move a certain point in space.
Ready to reach.
The trick is we have to know how to program the computer to tell the robot hand to do the right thing.
Retriever, grapple.
Closing hand.
And really enjoyed it because I got to work with my hands. I got to design and build something and then see it work.
Wow, the science fiction is now science fact.
Good evening. For those who may just be joining us, I'm Sharon Stallworth, and you're back with Education Roundtable. Right now, we're going to go out to the audience, and there are a number of questions. Mike?
How do we begin to establish the kind of relationships with the universities, possibly through funding through the state, hopefully, or some other method? But how do we do that to get some of those instructors into schools such as an empowered or an open school so that there can be some assistance to those teachers and consequently also to the parent and to the student, and the student, that child, is the focus of all of our attention. Can you help us with that?
Perhaps I should
Or you start, David, and I'll follow up.
Governor.
Sure.
We are beginning to have a greater appreciation of the need for people in the community who have special skills in math and science to work not only with the public schools but with the universities as well. And no one has a good format for this yet, but we do need to go out and recruit graduates who have gone into industry and business and into other sectors to work more closely with our public school students and with our university students. We do have a number of teachers at Wayne who are working closely with the public schools. We have a member of the math department who tutors youngsters in one of our Detroit public schools in order to help those who have fallen behind improve their skills. And so we need to just simply do more of that.
A couple of thoughts I might add to that just real quickly is that we, in recent years, have worked to change the certification laws to have an alternative certification route so you could actually bring someone into a classroom, maybe to do a specialized course of instruction that wouldn't today, under current certification, be allowed to do so. We think that's good, and that's an area where business has been very cooperative, but we need to take that further. The second area where I think there's going to be breakthroughs will be in the area of technology and telecommunications, interactive learning, where we're able to take that very talented, maybe the Nobel Prize winner or simply just outstanding researcher, whatever, and make that person available to that classroom through the use of technology so they aren't physically in there. So there's a whole array of things that are breaking loose, but I was very excited also to just hear your description of that school, because that sounds to me exactly like the schools that we want to replicate all across the state of Michigan, where parents are actively involved with teachers, and we have a parent asking that kind of a very far-sighted question. Thank you.
Before we go to another question, there was in the first segment we talked about choice schools, and it was suggested that there were very few, when in reality there are over 40 choice schools in the Detroit public school system. And our goal is to make every single school in Detroit a school of choice. And you simply take the existing money you have and redesign those schools so that they're places where parents want to send their children.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Wimberley from the Michigan Chronicle, and I just had a general question about inspiring hope in students. You know, now with the economy down and jobs hard to find, a lot of students now don't see very much hope in excelling in school. I was just wondering, how can you instill, you know, hope and the idealism that eventually, you know, they'll get a job and everything?
Well, I don't know. Geneva, I saw you start on that one. Do you want to start?
Well, I just wanted to say that I think, again, it goes back to people who care. I think when we can demonstrate to young people that we care about them, that we're there in their school, that we're willing to give of our time, that we will volunteer, that will help, that will tutor, that will be there, makes a real big difference in young people, coupled with an actual reward, so that for those of us who can in fact guarantee some jobs, give some tuition, let young people know that when in fact they do make the standards, that there is something that comes after that. And I think that's very important. So again, realizing that we all share in the responsibility of raising a young person, I think is important. We were talking earlier about back to basics, and I agree that the skills for the future aren't what they were 20 or 30 years ago, but there is a back to basics element that I think is important, and that is shared responsibility. Because if you remember when we came up, everyone cared about what we did, and I do think that's a back to basic element that we need to reinvest in our young people, and it's at the community, and parents in the community have the power to do that for our young people.
Mike, I want to take advantage of the fact that you've identified your publication, and Geneva and I sound somewhat like a team, and we both have a lot at stake in the compact, but your publication does an outstanding job of communicating to young people in this community what the Detroit Compact is and what the values of a good education are. And I simply want to compliment you and urge you to keep it up.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let me jump in on this question, because I think it is the basis of what we're trying to do with the state's economy, because we do have to have the kind of competitive job climate in this state. And it's almost a chicken or egg kind of question, because as I talk to business leaders across the state and across the nation, they are repeatedly defining the human resource as perhaps the most significant variable now that's going to determine where they're going to grow, where they're going to expand. We need to create an entrepreneurial climate. We're trying to do a number of those things. And the other side of the coin is that there just aren't the opportunities without the education. You know, let's just take it the other way. What's my hope if I don't learn, if I don't have a mastery of the basics, if I don't have the ability to go on? And frankly, that's a future without very much hope and without very much opportunity and without a belief that one can be independent. And I think knowledge is so important. and we were somewhat spoiled perhaps in Michigan and maybe in much of the industrial Midwest, because for many years, especially coming out of the post-war World War II period, we had a great quantity of industrial jobs, and they were repetitive jobs that you didn't need high skills. You could do a task 40 times an hour. If you did that well, over time you'd make a lot of money, and you could achieve a middle-class income. In effect, you could attain things and provide for your family. And I think what happened is that we lost sight of the change. We didn't talk about the change that was coming on enough, and in fact, American industry will admit today that they didn't recognize the change coming fast enough, and that's one of the reasons that we've seen some of our competitors outpace us. And so it's an environment of change now, and in the future, it is knowledge that's going to make the difference. And I just think that we've got to get that message out, and particularly to young people coming up in a family today where it's economically strapped, where they've been living in poverty. It has got to be the schools. It's got to be the knowledge that they gain. And as a community, we've all got an obligation, a shared responsibility to get that message across. And that is the only message of hope and opportunity, in my judgment.
Mike, I'd just like to add to what Geneva and what the governor said. I think that hope and motivation are directly related to your assessment of your future opportunities. And if I'm going to develop hope in young people, I have to show that all the young people who played by the rule got scholarships and went on to college. I have to show that young people who went through vocational training schools and had a skill were able to get a job. And they were able to get jobs that allowed them to live above the poverty level. And when in every school I can make that case over and over again, then the hope will be there for young people. But if they see, well, 30% of the children who had the grade point average, who were poor, could not get scholarships to go on to college, many young people will not buy into the system. That's a simple reality. We have to produce as a society. We have to not only care, but just as we're holding children to outcomes, we have to look at our society and say, what are you doing to guarantee that these young people have the opportunities that they should have?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Atkins from the Detroit News. I have a question for Dr. McGriff and Governor Engler. A program called Positive Action for Improved School Climate was recently eliminated in 13 Detroit schools, and it helped solve some of those violence problems that we were just talking about. I want to ask Governor Engler how, since you've addressed the need to correct some of this violence, how can you do that by eliminating programs? And Dr. McGriff, do you see any hope in restoring the program now that the state funding is cut, and what effect do you think that'll have on the schools?
Well, let me address that, because I actually read the same story. I don't know if you wrote the story or not, but sometimes in the coverage, there's the assumption that only that program exists and there's nothing else being done. One of the things we were proud of this year in the school aid bill is we had approximately a 4% increase. That was a pretty substantial investment given all of the other hard choices we had to make in the budget. What I am committed to doing as well within the school budget is to getting that funding into the hands of the schools in as discretionary a way as possible. That isn't the only line item that was taken out in the education bill. There were a few others, and the hope that I have is that we can get back to the point where we can treat all school districts equitably so that we get the resources distributed in a fair fashion and leave the schools with the maximum amount of flexibility. Line items like this, and this one may have fallen more heavily on the Detroit Public School District, but there were others that didn't. Detroit shared in none of those dollars. And so what I've tried to do is to move away from this idea of legislatively crafting little line items that represent programs that somebody then can structure an application for, and get back to the idea that school funding ought to be understandable to the public and to the legislature, and it ought to be equitable across the board, not specific item by item by item. I want to get away from that.
In response to your question, I can't answer you today regarding this specific program, because I have a series of other budget cuts that were made. And so as a school board and as a superintendent, we need to make some decisions collectively, and the other cuts total about $1.5 million. So we need to decide, of those other cuts, which programs are we going to put in, which programs will we have to terminate because we're not going to continue to get the money. And so this is just one program in a mix of lots of others.
Dr. McGriff, One thing that I found, or at least I heard from a lot of parents when I did my Man on the Street, and that's the fact of how do you prepare a child for school? I know, Governor Engler, you made that point very clear that we must prepare our children for school. How do we do that? How do we do that? What's necessary for a parent?
It's interesting that one of the local papers a few weeks ago had a survey, and 75% of the people who make more than $50,000 involve their children in some form of preschool education. So that's one thing that you can do. Yet Head Start, which is a program that provides preschool services for low-income children, is only funded at a level that will allow 20% of low-income parents to have their youngsters enrolled in a preschool experience. So some type of preschool experience is mandatory. Then you have to have the type of health and social services that all young people need. Every mother from conception needs to have appropriate health and social services in order to have a healthy youngster. If you don't take care of the first 9 months, you're already starting birth with problems. I think we need to spend more time in upgrading the skills of parents, all parents, so that parents know how to develop language skills, know how to develop a love for reading, all of the kinds of enriching home environments that bring young people to school excited about learning and wanting to continue learning.
Yes, I'm Ben Wade, publisher of the Blazer newspaper in Jackson and president of the Michigan Black Publishers Association. I'm concerned with the apparent level of funding for education as opposed to the level of funding for state prisons. There currently is some $3,000 per student spent for education and approximately $30,000 per year spent to keep a person incarcerated. How can we bring those differences closer together, and what's the possibility in your 2000 plan to provide a college education as maybe perhaps the state of California does for all students?
Well, there are a couple of, that's a good question, and one that's, I think, profoundly troubling in terms of society's priorities. But the actual investment per student now is up to about $3,600, $3,700 per student, but still it pales in comparison to the annual cost of keeping a prisoner in, say, Jackson Prison. The strategy that we have there is, number one, to try to reduce the cost of prisons, but really, you've got to, you know, at that point, we've already lost a good deal of the fight here. We would hope, and we're intent on strengthening two programs in prison, substance abuse and our education. I mean, we've got Ionia Prison, the reformatory, with young men from 16 to 21 that are literally all of them having literacy skills that maybe would hit 7th grade level if they tested strong. Many of them not that. So we hope to work on that while they're in prison. But I think the fact that we have those kinds of costs reinforces us in our commitment to improve the schools so we can train and educate. There's almost a direct correlation, lack of education, likelihood of prison. I mean, it's staggering, the correlation that exists. And so our emphasis and focus will be on the schools. The numbers, in one sense, don't, I mean, they break down a little bit differently. We don't keep those children in school, you know, I mean, year-round, obviously, and feed them and all of that. But still, I mean, the point is well made, and I think those statistics. We have an $800 million budget for prisons in the state of Michigan, 30,000 men and women incarcerated in our state, and you can take that number to 90,000 plus when you add in the probationers out there, and that's a tremendous cost to all of us as a society.
Okay, Ms. Williams.
I guess I would just like to also add, Governor, that to the extent that we can bring the human services community together with educators working in the school, we win, because we know that educators need the opportunity to do what they do best, and that's teach our children. And we know social workers and others can work with families and help solve those problems that kids unfortunately do bring into the classroom. So I think the extent to which we can do that and work with families to help keep them strong, we win. Programs, family preservation programs, the Families First program in Michigan, and other programs like the Family Approach to Crime and Treatment, the FACT program, these are the kinds of examples when we work to keep families strong and we work to keep them healthy, that they in fact can raise their children and help educators teach their children.
One of the things that's real important too that might just add on to that, is something that we're looking at, and the private agencies like yours, I mean, that are out there are such a good example, because the dollar of service rendered, or percentage of service rendered for each dollar, is so much higher than some of the public programs. And we're looking at how we can literally turn over programs to you, not with the idea of saving money, but merely with the idea of getting more out of the dollars invested, and to link those more tightly in the community, because so much of what we've talked about, being volunteer friendly, about a caring community, if we could drive the services down to the neighborhood, to the community level, and cut past all the bureaucracy, I think we're going to get a lot more done for people that need the services. And so one of my challenges, I guess, on our panel today is we're in the business of entertaining good proposals that people want to make as to how they could take over state functions, and we will do that at the cost of literally downsizing some of our state government in order to put those dollars direct. And I think that's...
We'll start with the $500 million that Wayne County pays in the state lottery. Bring it back to Detroit, we'll administer it.
$500 million is the total net for the entire state.
No, that's $500 million for Wayne County is $1.2 billion statewide in lottery funds. $500 million comes from Wayne County.
Oh, the net profit is happening.
The net,
And all that we can use at the community level.
And let me ask you one other question to Geneva. How do you keep a family unit together if there's no money, if people don't have basics to buy food and have shelter? How do you keep a family unit together in that environment?
Yeah, dealing with the basics is important, and that's why that's one of the first things we have to do, that when we go in. But you know, there are resources available in the community for food, clothing, and shelter. And what happens is when you work with a family, you're able to identify all those many resources that go out there and people don't know about them. And when we work with families and do things together, we can find those resources and help make families strong. Oftentimes, families just need a little help over the crises. So if we can talk about emergency monies and trying to get people over their emergency, then we can work with them further and make that family strong. It works.
And with that, you have the last word. We'd like to thank you all for joining us, and we know we'll hear more from you and about Education 2000 here in Michigan. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Education, Our Common Struggle is brought to you by Stallworth and Lindenbeck.
At Michigan Bell, we don't make our employees the kind of people they are. They make us the kind of company we are.
You may have noticed something on your insurance bill called the MCCA assessment. If you're injured, your insurance company pays the medical bills up to the first $250,000. The MCCA pays everything beyond that. That really means that you and I pay those bills, because state law requires that all drivers pay into this fund. Next year, those assessments will be $110 per automobile. The MCCA is really a tax that auto insurers collect for the state.
Everyone looks at the music business and at artists as being glamour and glitz, and they see the parties and the lights and the limousines. But in reality, there's an awful lot of hard work that goes into getting records sold and artists being on the stage. Every job that I can think of requires a good understanding of math, because what we're doing is we're selling records, we're selling tickets, and it all has to do with earning money. And in order to count money the right way, you have to know how to count.
Welcome back, and I hope you're enjoying this special presentation on education. Certainly this program is a testament to the importance we place on the value of quality education. It's so very important for young people to understand that a quality education makes all the difference not only to their career success, but to the quality of life of their neighbors and their neighbors' children. Here within our organization, with 150 employees within our brokerage group, there has to be not only persons that are technically proficient, but individuals that have dedication and commitment to providing not only service to their clients, but to their co-workers. We have individuals like Sheldon Peven, a team leader that's up at 4 a.m. when the London marketplace opens, assessing coverages and developing pricing strategies. Individuals like Vicky Skirty that handle customer service for our clients, that help them really sleep well at night by adding on programs for them or deleting them as their business requires. Individuals like Sandy Cook, a marketing specialist that probably talks to somewhere between 20 and 30 insurance companies a day, negotiating programs on behalf of clients. And of course, Kathy Bargenier, a claims manager who not only makes sure that you're paid as an insured promptly and expeditiously, but fairly, to make sure that your costs don't rise in the future. Individuals such as these are not geniuses or scientists, but they are all committed not only to excellence in their work, but excellence on behalf of their coworkers. These opportunities are extended to young people through a number of internship programs. You're about to be introduced to an internship program we place a great deal of value in. We hope that it tracks you as a corporation to contribute to an internship opportunity, and as a young person, we hope you do seek out the opportunity yourself. Have a great holiday. God bless you.
You better stay in school. You can't make it without a college degree. These statements and others bombard today's youth like never before. The statements, while true, tell only half the story, though. The reality is that while you need an education to get a good job, you also need contacts. People who can steer you in the right direction, help you avoid the pitfalls, open doors. For many people of color, key contacts are not readily available. And that's why the Black Caucus Foundation of Michigan established the Minority Student Internship Program.
The Black Caucus Foundation started out of a concern on the part of black legislators that we have some measurable goal that relates to our community to the extent that we could become more proactive on public policy issues. We also felt a need to be involved with young people to the extent that we were stimulating their opportunities. And so we got involved initially with starting an intern program. Our students are principally third year, and we have probably a greater percentage from Michigan State University. This year was the first year that we were involved with Wayne State University to the extent that we had some local opportunities through companies like Mishcon, Sisters of Mercy, and W.D. Needham, which is an ad agency out in Troy. There were about 10 or 12 companies that extended this opportunity after learning about the program. We have not been as broadly represented in terms of all the kids in the state simply because we don't really have staff. This is really a voluntary kind of effort, and most of the money we raise provide a stipend for the students. $500 for our undergrad, $1,000 for our graduate students. It's not a lot of money, but it does help them in terms of some of their personal expenses, and also assures that they're able to sustain their commitment in terms of showing up for the committed block of time they've agreed to.
First time I met Representative Stallworth, I was a page on the House floor, and one of the duties of the House pages is to answer runs for state legislators, and that's when I met Representative Stallworth, and we became very good friends. And at the end of my internship as a House page, the representative asked me if I would consider becoming an intern in the newly started Black Caucus Foundation program.
Jonathan was unique in that he started off as a page in the Capitol, and they're only employed for a set amount of time. So when he exceeded the year, and it's usually a year, he was off the program. And when he heard about our starting an intern program, he was our first intern. So he came to our office and signed up. We didn't really have any money to pay him, but he said he would be willing to work until whatever. So that is what began our relationship. When he got into the international program, it was through Michigan State and Lansing Community College. This program was established when Lansing became a sister city to Shiga, Japan, which is where our national intern program is. Those young people go over there and stay 9 months. They work on a boat called the Michigan. They learn the culture, study the language, and come back home, hopefully, benefiting from that experience. So Jonathan was one of the people selected, and we worked very hard to get him into it.
The Black Caucus Foundation internship program is extremely valuable to a young person just starting out. Not only does it provide mentoring networks, it also offers the opportunity to get real-world experience.
The internship program is set up primarily to do two things. One, to identify students who are interested in opportunities to work and gain some experience prior to graduation. Two, to find employers who have opportunities for those students. And then three, to match those two. Once students find themselves in the workforce, the foundation provides a stipend to the employer, primarily as an incentive to get them to utilize the students. In many cases, our smaller companies really don't have the kind of financial wherewithal to bring untrained people into the workforce, and so that stipend helps them. It also provides a time frame where students can gain some knowledge on the job, hopefully get up to speed, and then become fully productive in that workforce.
The intern program is really designed to provide a link for minority students to the business community, the healthcare community, state government, and the legislature. Mentoring is important to the African American student because in most instances, these young people have not had the exposures. If they've been successful in their high school experience, they've pretty much gone to school and participated in school activities. There are few that experience having a job if their parents are well connected, but a lot of our young people don't realize their first job till they're 18 years old. If they've come to a campus like Michigan State University, they're really struggling with the adjustments of the population to the extent they're being exposed for the first time, where they're in the minority rather than the majority, as they experienced in many of our urban centers like Detroit. They're struggling with curriculum, how to adjust from being, to being on their own, away from home, and then trying to keep up with their schoolwork to the extent jobs are the last thing they think about.
Internship program is very beneficial because it allows the students some hands-on practice in the area of governmental affairs, and it's extremely important for them to experience this themselves. This is information that can be obtained here that you're unable to learn that in the school process.
We think young people, black or white, need to be encouraged and need to become more involved in government and understand how government works as it becomes a bigger and bigger part of our everyday life, and as a business person of how we interact with government. And so we think this is an excellent program, and we're just very happy to be involved from the start, and we plan on continuing our contribution and our participation.
Absolutely. We would look to the Black Caucus Foundation internship program as an opportunity to provide opportunities for more minorities here at DDB Needham. And while we've just started in it, we've only been in it a year, we're going to continue in that program, and we'll certainly be coming back and looking at, and hopefully those individuals that worked with us will come back to us and say, hey, we liked it there, would like to take a shot at it, and yes, we would like to see that as potentially a feeder system, if you will, for us. I think it'll work well for both parties. It'll help us get to know some folks and to get some minorities involved out here in our business.
The Black Caucus Foundation is involved in both the public and the private sector in their attempts to match students up with opportunities that will help them grow and develop. The public sector provides a vast array of opportunities for them, ranging from social service oriented positions on to more technical positions like accounting and engineering. The private sector offers similar opportunities. In a economic downturn where jobs are difficult to find, I think the Black Caucus Foundation has done a masterful job in terms of looking at both sectors to identify opportunities for young people.
There is currently a lot of people who come out of college who are actually don't have any college or don't have any work experience. And my parents have always taught me that work experience is always important, and references. And to a college student who I would say was in their junior or senior year, I would highly recommend doing an internship in any capacity, whether it be for a law firm or for something in their field, hopefully, but just something to get work experience and also to get valuable contacts. The system at the Capitol and state government, that whole process is like a springboard. Once you make the contacts as an intern or page in someone's office, you get to know, you get to know their contacts or someone in their network who may be of assistance to you once you graduate from college.
Good evening and welcome to the second portion of our panel discussion on education. Joining us now is Mike Gooden from Crane's Detroit Business, Mike Payne, of course, who you met earlier in the broadcast from WGPR, Cliff Russell from WWJ, and Elizabeth Atkins from the Detroit News. Thank you all for being here with us tonight.
Thanks. Thank you, Cliff.
Certainly in our discussion this evening, we've heard a lot about the importance of education and the challenge of the education impairment, not only locally but nationally. Given all of the recession problems that we do have, here in Detroit in particular, over the last few weeks there's been a great deal of concern and outcry regarding the homeless. Of course, we've seen on the national level a great deal of discussion about unemployment benefits. Given that kind of discussion and the seriousness of other issues which in fact impact education, is it realistic that we have education as our top priority, or is that something that elected officials are choosing to espouse right now?
Well, I think it's a realistic goal, mission to aspire to. I mean, one of the root problems of homelessness, unemployment, is competition in the world marketplace. And obviously, I think there's a good consensus that we need better educated workers in order to compete against foreign manufacturers and businesses. So I think education is right where it should be, right at the top of the agenda.
But Mike, how do we get there? I mean, in the city of Detroit in particular, or any other urban center where our students are really struggling with so many different concerns, the question is, you know, which support mechanism do you start with first? Certainly at my alma mater, we're very fortunate to be a Detroit compact school where we do have a computer center which has advanced technology for those students, but it's still one classroom. How do you expand that throughout the entire system where we do have an opportunity to have students that are really prepared to compete?
Well, that's probably what you're really talking about when you say is education at the top of the agenda. In Detroit, students have so many problems that they have to grapple with other than just getting to class and getting the book open to the right page. You know, they have to deal with peer pressure, problems in the community, home life, family life. But you still got to have that, you know, that star you're reaching for. I think it's realistic to say you want people to graduate.
I totally agree that education should be at the top of the agenda, but at the same time, as Dr. McGriff said several times and the other panelists agreed with her, violence in the schools and in the community is a huge problem. Just this week, 2 young women were raped on their way to school, and one student was shot in a classroom at Miller Middle School the other day. I mean, if you're getting shot in the classroom and attacked on the way to school, how can you possibly concentrate?
Well, wait a minute. This is not just an urban problem. I mean, this kind of violence is really happening throughout our community. I think Cliff was talking about the preparedness issue and the other stresses and pressures at home. Certainly in the workplace now, employers are grappling in their employee benefits whether or not they need to be providing psychology and substance abuse counseling and other kinds of services.
Yeah, in fact, if I could add one, it was mentioned earlier that perhaps education is now on the front burner. It is a top priority. I know a lot of people say that. I'm not sure I've seen the true commitment in terms of the dollars, in terms of people initiating programs and doing things. More importantly, the input from the community in terms of parents taking active parts. Now, then again, we go to the other issue of people with problems. So, and I've had the benefit of having taught a semester in the Detroit public school system. It was an invaluable experience. The first thing I noticed about the schools was the lack of parental involvement, the lack of mechanisms for parents to become involved. That's a very important part.
Well, whose responsibility is that?
I'm not sure it's the schools. I think it's everyone's responsibility. Now, let's understand that not all parents, not all community groups were negligent in their responsibility to become active and do things with the schools, but it's not enough for us to be individually accountable. I think we have to go out and beat the bushes and let people know the importance of getting involved with schools and kind of bring people along with them to do things within the schools. I'm not sure I see that yet.
Mike, you spent a lot of times in the schools preparing for this program. What was the attitude of the students that you encountered?
Basically, not only just the students, but parents and teachers as well. They all stress the point that you cannot have a school system that's under a bubble, that whatever's going on in your community, in your city, will eventually leak into schools, jobs, and other areas, even churches. Even churches, if you happen to notice, churches here in the city of Detroit and around the country, especially in Florida with the fires that they've been having, no one is safe from crime. So when it comes down, it has to be a concerted effort on everyone's part, government, the community, the religious community, and schools.
Well, one of the ways that certainly the Detroit School Board has attempted to address at-risk children, particularly African-American males, has been the Male Academy. In recent weeks, we've had some discussions about female-oriented academies. Certainly our community is split over this issue. Where do you think we are, Elizabeth?
Well, at the school board meeting last week, they had a presentation from the Marcus Garvey Academy, and they had some of the young boys come up and receive awards for their academic achievements, and they explained the daily procedures in the classrooms that focus on self-esteem and studying, and it all sounded really great. And I think that having female-oriented classes, they're only allowed to have classes, not academies, because of the federal order. I think that's a good idea as long as the instruction that they're given is on par with what the boys are getting.
Now, I got to say something here because that sounds totally inane to me. These academies have been in operation, weeks, and they're giving awards already for academic achievement. That's one of the problems that we have in our community, this fixation with awards and acknowledging, contributions of people and ignoring the real deal of getting down to business and taking care of work. I have nothing against the academies per se, but the school system has been hard-pressed to come up with a way to account for progress or retrogression in the academic system, and yet all of a sudden they can say after a few weeks that here these students have achieved admirably and let's give them an award at the
wait a minute, Mike.
school board meeting. I mean, come on, let's be serious. Let's have some real benchmarks and measuring points,
Well, I agree with you. I think certainly none of us want to see fluff, but certainly we do need positive reinforcement out there. I think to that point, though, probably an issue that has attracted more attention would be the recent incentives that were granted to teachers that performed well. I guess the total was something like $100,000 that was given to high performers, and at the state level we may have had 4 or 5 teachers that received substantial sums on top of their salaries for high performance. Certainly some type of incentive is needed, but what's the reaction to the other teachers out there, and will that be a motivating factor for them in the future?
I think the teachers are just going to have to grit their teeth and accept the fact that some people want to award teachers on merit. If the Milken family can give Detroit public school teachers $25,000 for refreshing ideas in the classroom, certainly the school system can reward their teachers themselves, I think.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with giving awards to these boys at the school board meeting. I mean, I was really impressed with some of the things they were doing, and it's the teachers, the principal, the parents, they're all very, very committed, and I think they should be commended for that.
The other thing, I think it also will speak to the students' ability to go back and talk to other students about the importance of the program. We're not saying that it's a catch-all, but certainly, Mike, it's a start. I don't know, Cliff, what do you think, and what's been the reaction from the people that you've spoken with?
Most of the people that I've spoken with in the community think that, first of all, the fact that the school system is doing something to address the problem is good. All the bugs aren't ironed out yet. There's still some controversy as to whether or not this should be offered to females and as well as the males. The question I have is that, are we really touching the population we need to touch? A lot of the young men and young women, I guess, too, who want to be enrolled in these academies are there because of an impetus from their parents. Their parents wanted to enroll them. They applied. Many of the young men who are at risk don't have those types of parental support mechanisms or community support mechanisms.
Excuse me, was at risk a criterion for getting into the academy?
At risk is what we are trying to diminish the risk within our communities and within our schools.
Was it a criteria for
I don't know if it is or
getting
not.
into the academy, or like standing in line to get into Golightly Educational Center?
I don't know if that is or not, but I don't care. What I'm saying is that I think that the at-risk young men and women in the system is the crucial area that has to be addressed. And whether we set up male academies, whether we set up clubs after school, whether we set up special tutoring sessions, whether we set up all-night schools, as they have done in some cities, that the young men and women who are at risk or who are borderline dropout students, young men and women who have problems at home, I think that is the core that has to be addressed. And whether or not the academies address that problem, I don't know. I'm not sure. I know when the academies first opened their doors, I saw a lot of mothers and fathers parading their kids to the schools, making sure they got into the classes, making sure they were registered. I think that is beautiful. But my question was, what about those young men and women who don't have parents at home to do this, or whose parents, for whatever reason, are not involved or not inclined to do that type of thing? Who is doing something for them?
Well, let me ask this question of everyone here. And that is, when it comes down to all male academies, and it's a given, I guess, female academies, are we going to support these type of schools just to help protect at-risk students? Or are we going to try to at least advance these students? Because still, we must compete in a world market. Now, giving awards is fine. It's great for self-esteem, it's great motivation or inspiration. But yet and still, when a student leaves a male academy or a female academy, will they be able to compete with that student, say in Birmingham or in Los Angeles? Can we actually say that that student will be able to do that? Will they get the same quality education that the student in Birmingham will get?
Well, you're getting back to the same fundamental issue of, with diminishing dollars in a slow economy, you know, what do you spend the dollars on first? Is it on self-esteem, motivation, reinforcement, or is it on hard goods and textbooks and technology, bringing in spokespersons and teachers, spending time on upgrading educational requirements? And I don't think any of us know the answer.
Keith, when I was researching education here in Michigan, especially in the Metro Detroit area, one thing that I did find was in Birmingham, they have a special program set up with AT&T to where students, we're talking about young students, 10, 12 years old, are able to sit down at a computer and interface with someone in New York City. Now, that's the kind of computer that they have to where they can write little stories and they could send it to their friend in New York, and their friend could interface with the student here and send a story back. You can't find a computer like that here in the city.
Oh, yes, you can, at the Compact Technology Center at Mumford.
But how many students can do that?
Michigan Bell.
By Michigan Bell.
Let me just say one thing. I want to quote a former board member whose name might be not liked too much in this city, Alonzo Bates. He once said, "Who needs money? What we need is a teacher in front of a blackboard and a piece of chalk." That's how you learn, and that's how kids get knowledge. But unfortunately, you raise a point. In a high-tech age, don't we need hardware like computers.
You know, I'd like to also bring up the point that it's foolish for us to get into an either-or mentality. Gee, either we spend bucks here or we spend bucks there. Either we concentrate on technology or we concentrate on the basics. It's all of the above. All of the above.
Well, you know, the governor has taken a lot of heat over this issue in terms of cost reductions, and the question begs, if that is the major imperative, I mean, what kind of reinforcement can parents or taxpayers provide if those dollars aren't going to come from either the state or federal government to provide that reinforcement? Can corporations in the metro area pick up the slack to put in the computers or to provide the other incentives that really will give teachers the tools they need to perform?
And that corporations have a stake in the young men and women who are educated in our schools, who will come out asking for jobs one day, working in their factories. They should play a role. They should have always played a role, and they should always play a role from here on out. But the onus is not upon them, it's upon all of us. And that's the point that you brought out earlier, Mike, that was very well spoken, that it's not a situation where it's operating in a bubble. Everyone and everybody involved has to do it. I go back to whether or not the priorities are straight. There are dollars out there. The question is, how many dollars do you put into education? Not so much, gee, the dollars that are there for education, how much do we allocate to this, that, and the other? Should the pot itself be bigger?
Well, hold that thought. We'll take a commercial break and we'll come right back and we'll focus on priorities and funding.
Education, Our Common Struggle, is brought to you by Stallworth and Lindenbeck.
What would you do if you walked into every automobile showroom in Michigan, but all you could find were luxury models? You probably couldn't afford to buy a car. That's one of the problems with automobile insurance in Michigan. Our state law requires that you purchase luxury model insurance. You have no choice. The insurance companies that we represent think you should have a choice in what kind of automobile insurance you buy. If you agree with us, please contact your state lawmaker. Tell them that you want some choices in the kind of insurances that are available to you.
What are you doing?
Freaking out.
What now?
My boss asked me to make the sales presentation.
When your confidence needs a little push.
That's great. Are you kidding? I faint in front of crowds. Remember the play?
Or maybe a show.
That was the 3rd grade.
Well, I do know this stuff inside and out.
Friends always seem to know what you need to hear.
You're gonna knock them dead. Now, let's get down to the real issue.
What?
What are you gonna wear?
Just call your
Oh, if I got something that would make a statement.
Here at Mumford High School. So with that, Dr. Oden, we would like to present you with something. This serves as our commitment, first $1,000 installment for the Computer Technology Center at Mumford, which we will use as a motivational tool to get all other alumnus to contribute to the Technology Center in hopes that we will be able to attract additional training, special guest speakers, national guest speakers to assist you in your fine work here at Mumford. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Welcome back. We ended our discussion really talking about the impact of state funding on education. Elizabeth, you wanted to share something with us.
Well, during the discussion earlier with the governor and the other panelists, I thought some of the discussion was a little bit hypocritical because it was talking about all the steps that can be taken, yet those steps require money, and money is being cut. So it just seemed very, very illogical. One of the things the governor said was that it's up to parents and community activists and volunteers to help improve the state of the schools right now and help the students learn.
Well, I think what the governor was saying at that point was something about parents or volunteers being more involved in helping control school safety. And I don't know whether or not that is a realistic goal or not, to have a parent take time off from work and go up and try to do the job of a security guard. There are also, one of the students in the tape that Mike interviewed said that perhaps they should have metal detectors in the schools, and we all know how that went over when that was introduced as an idea. But your question really is, how do you really improve that environment without dollars?
Right, and putting the responsibility on the parents, I think, is okay to a certain degree. It's just that a lot of parents maybe are working more than one job or trying to find a job and have other children to take care of, and they just don't have the time to play police officer.
Right, and it goes back to the point we made earlier. that a lot of people are allowing themselves to be duped into the argument of, well, look, we're going to cut your money, but you can supplement that by being more active in the schools as parents and having fundraisers and pushing for quality education, as if you couldn't have both, as if you could not only maintain funding, but increase funding and push for more parental involvement. And people have been...
Involvement is a cop-out for not delivering the basic services that you're supposed to, as a point of fact. Just like saying that a lot of people are not getting jobs is because they're not educationally prepared to handle the jobs is a cop-out for not hiring people in the cities, in urban communities, which I think is in a way racist by its nature. To say that Detroit has one of the highest unemployment rates in the state because our kids can't read or write, I think is hypocritical. I recall, what, a decade ago, we couldn't have blacks running corporate boards or sitting with CEOs because they weren't qualified. And I remember even longer before that, the companies would come right out and say, well, we don't hire blacks because our employees don't want them. So I think it seems like every time people in the black community complain about conditions, somebody comes up with an excuse, and all of a sudden we've got this crisis in education that we can't solve immediately, so therefore the unemployment rate continues to climb.
But wait a minute, Mike, doesn't the squeaky wheel get the oil? I mean, certainly we're all talking about the importance of education, but we've seen immediate reaction, a little bit delayed, regarding the homeless problem. We've seen in Washington extension of unemployment benefits. I mean, these were issues that were not on the local or national agenda 6 months ago, but all of a sudden they're important now.
Those are on the agenda every pre-winter season. The homeless problem becomes an issue when it starts to get cold.
You know, I like your squeaky wheel issue too, and first I should preface this by saying there are hundreds, if not thousands, of very committed parents and teachers and administrators and community people in Detroit pushing for better education. But I do know, after quite an extended period of time covering the Detroit Board of Education at WWJ, I would be appalled at going to those meetings on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whenever, and there was always a hardcore group of gadflies and concerned parents and others. But in many of the meetings, there were more people from the superintendent's staff in the room than there were people in the community who either had a gripe or just wanted to show up and be there, compared to some of the suburban or other areas that I've gone to where they had school board meetings where there were just larger numbers of people, certainly more proportionally. And so perhaps you're right. Perhaps we don't have enough squeaky wheels.
Well, and the other question is, I mean, certainly if you work all day and you're getting ready to come in and participate in a community activity, I mean, if you're getting beat up all day on the job, why should you come into a public environment to volunteer time and get beat up again by persons that should have the same interest?
Well, your kids will get beat up in school if you don't go and show your interest and your concern.
That's really the question. I mean, are we finding that more parents that do have the resources, you know, just find it a much easier task just to take their students out of the district or to move a little bit further away from the problem, quote unquote?
There's a lot of movement around the school system, people jockeying for the better schools, the so-called alternate schools, and that's sad, because I have seen situations where parents are very active in their school and it still just does not deliver. You know, that the structure of the school is wrong, the staff is wrong. I think that people are out there picking up this weight. I mean, last week, 12 Together, the dropout prevention program, was recognized in the President's Point of Light program, because dropout prevention, peer group counseling is something that works with at-risk students. I think the commitments of many, you mentioned Mumford and their partner, Michigan Bell. Well, McKinsey is going to get a high-tech lab with IBM eventually, and they're going to put up the money along with the school system. I think businesses and people who have an interest in their community are taking up the weight and getting out and getting involved in the schools. And I know all of you guys go to schools and talk at career days and interface with students. I think that that's one good sign of what can happen in the community to get things going.
I'll go back to another point, then I'll shut up for a while, I guarantee it. But you mentioned Michigan Bell at Mumford, and I've been there. It's a beautiful facility. But in addition to Michigan Bell at Mumford, You need perhaps Mr. Bell, who lives on the corner, getting involved with some of the students who go to Mumford, and not just for career days, although those are very good, but on a regular basis, if there is a way to incorporate these people in the community who want to do things, perhaps act as mentors, you know, something you talked about. And also, Michigan legislature and Michigan government and whoever else can allocate funds for that to not abrogate their responsibility of providing quality education for our young people.
Are we really getting to the point where there's going to be an expectation, just as there is with many of the social service agencies, that schools take some responsibility to organize their alumni, raise money themselves, and try to provide the additional support that really they've been losing over a period of time?
I tell you, let's do this for right now. Let me ask this question, and that is, what is the basic responsibility of the federal government when it comes to education of our young people? What is the state's responsibility, and what is the school's responsibility? Are they there to be babysitters? Are they there to be psychiatrists? Are they there to teach? Are they there to, what are they there for? What are teachers, what's expected of teachers? Most of the teachers that I talked to said that too much is being expected of us. There's not enough money, there's not enough tools, and there's not enough involvement by the state. There's no uniformity. When you talk about male academies and female academies and all of these specialized schools, you know, what good is it? Why not just have uniformity as far as the schools within the state? And that is, whatever you can learn in Birmingham, Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, you can learn the same thing here.
Well, you know, the funding reform, the kind of attempt at equalization in state school funding is kind of a step in that direction. I mean, it's been kind of polarized because everyone thinks this is like a Detroit thing, you know. Yeah, it's those people in Detroit that need all this money from Birmingham school system. But we know that, you know, northern Michigan schools are paying a lot less per child for education than even Detroit, for that matter. But that's one step towards trying to equalize the funding. Now, as far as
but it's not about
the curricula.
See, we're talking, it's the curriculum that's important. And that is, does a student, a 12th grade student here in the city of Detroit, know just as much as a student in Birmingham, as a student in Grosse Pointe?
No, because there are so many things that are competing for their energy, for their worries. There's so many other things competing with
so whose
their
responsibility
schooling.
is it?
It's everyone's responsibility.
And I think we were talking about this during the break, and I think, you know, I shared with Cliff that when I was a child, I think the most pressing issue was that no student would come to school hungry. I mean, that was kind of the pervasive theme of the day. Certainly now, many of our children come to school with so many varying problems, whether it's substance abuse, child abuse in the home, whether or not it's fear of being attacked or mugged. Maybe, in fact, they have a job, even though they're an adolescent. I mean, there are any number of challenges which may prevent that child from really receiving the education that's there to be gotten.
But should the answers to that child's problems, personal problems, should those problems be addressed by teachers, or should they be addressed by parents and community organizations?
Schools used to have social workers and psychologists on staff until they were overwhelmed by the number of cases they had to deal with. But I made a statement when off camera that I thought that there are people, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but I hear this a lot. We've got more black people in prison than we do in colleges. Well, there are people who go to prison where you have all of those problems packed into a little sardine can, and they come out with college degrees or GEDs. I think Cliff is maybe the closest one to the real issue when he talks about community and parental involvement. You can learn under duress if you're motivated, if you've got support, and if there are clear, concise goals that you're trying to achieve.
But how do you get that into the process? Certainly, the Urban League has done a fine job with their male responsibility program. Certainly, New Detroit has a mentoring program. Of course, the foundation does. But it's not enough. How do you get people involved to understand that you really have to take time, whether or not you have a student in the system or not, to give something back?
Start off as an individual. I go back to something I've been thinking about in this discussion here is having gone to some, say, athletic contests in the high schools. And this should be not only an event for school students to enjoy, say, a football game or a basketball game. There should be parents there. There should be members of the community there. I can remember when the Public School League championship games in basketball used to draw, Cobo would be packed. You couldn't get down there. This year, this past season, when Southwestern had 2 or 3 All-Americans and they played a great game against Cooley down at, I think, Cobo or Joe Louis, they barely filled the first tier. And a lot of those were students who weren't coming, but also parents and other community people. How do you regain that spirit? How do you get whatever people felt back then, how do you get that back?
Okay, here's the key question. What destroyed that? What destroyed that?
One thing that might destroy it is people like the Pistons Foundation is constantly giving away free tickets to Pistons games to school students. Now, who wants to go see a high school team play if you can see Isaiah Thomas play? I understand what you're getting at. That's not what we're really talking about. And I'm going back to Lonnie Bates again. Hey, you know, you get home, you got homework, and the parent sits you down and says, hey, let's do it. You know, you're flashing multiplication cards, and the homework is checked before you go to school the next day by your parent.
But like a lot of parents told me when I was like I said, researching education here, especially in the city of Detroit, and that is they have to work 2 jobs. They cannot tell that child over the phone, no, do not cut on that TV set until you finish your homework. No, you cannot go over your friend's house until you finish your homework. Who's there to monitor that child?
And I think because of that, it's incumbent on those parents who are fortunate enough not to have to work 2 jobs to do some things for not only their own children, but for some neighborhood children. Look, after school, come by my house. This is what we're going to be doing. I understand your mother and father work. Instead of you staying home and being a latchkey kid, come by my house. Or me and Mike, let's say we only work 1 job and we're home in the evenings. Let us get together and set up some type of, I don't know if it'll be a sports team, if we go and rent a gym from some church or from the local school or whatever, but do something. I mean, another point I'm making, I'll cut it quick. I can remember when in the Detroit Public Schools, when I was in the schools at Corville Elementary on the east side, when after school, there was almost as much activity in the school as during school. We had Boy Scouts, girls were learning how to knit and cook, PTA meetings were coming in and out of the schools. That type of thing has been lost.
Well, I think, Cliff, what you've said is really summed up really where we are. Certainly, we didn't expect to solve all these problems tonight, but the theme of our program was, in fact, education, our common struggle. We're all in this together. We're either going to die with it or we're going to live with it. Certainly, students can achieve. Certainly, there is support for them. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Have a happy holiday.
Self-esteem. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get down. Let's get together and unite this town. And yo, let's love one another. City for you, my brother. time to make a change. City for you. It's time to make a change. Come on, everybody, let's get together. City for you.